Hey, my creative friends. My name is Shannon from shannonstudio.com. And that's where I put my work. There's going to my website, there's going to be a little evolution going on in the next couple months. So you can just, but for now, shannonstudio.com is where you work. But I'm here to talk about a creative life, creative tips, creative things happening in the world, how to look at the world creatively, all the creative things. So that's what we talk about here. I talk about Sweden because I've been living in Sweden for a year. I'm from the States, but Sweden for a year, and that has been a fantastic adventure for us. Hey, friend. So today, nothing much. I've just been home doing, school's out, so doing a little domestic work today. Though I did have a little moment this morning when Joseph set himself up with the tablet and did videos of himself teaching how to make confetti. And they are dang cute. And he just goes through the whole process. It's like, as much as I struggled to do this in the beginning, he has no struggle, quite the opposite. Just so natural, so he enjoys it. But I did tell him he can't put it on the World Wide Web. And so he knows several years for that to happen. So that's pretty funny, really funny. Okay, so about the tip tonight. Tonight, I'm going to take you back to the 50s and in the United States, basically, but England too, and in different places. Hey, Joan. And so in the 1950s, what it looked like for women, because I'm going to talk about this woman, Dame Stephanie Shirley. And so she, in several of her talks, she has talked about what it was like for women in business, in the world, in their existence in the 50s. She was born in 1939. Or no, she was 5 in 1939. So she was a young woman coming of age at. So in the 50s, she says women were considered second-class citizens. I think so. It was illegal for a woman to open up a bank account unless she had her husband's permission. She couldn't sign a contract for a TV, a car, a mortgage. I mean, a TV. She couldn't have jobs. There's certain jobs that women weren't allowed to have. We weren't allowed to have. Driving a bus, flying a plane, astronaut, practicing law. Even if you could go to school for law, you could pass all the tests, but you couldn't plead a client for in court until 1971. So you couldn't go to Ivy League schools, Yale, Princeton, Harvard, not until the late 60s, 1969 and 1977. I keep saying you. It would have been me. It would have been you, had we been around during that time. So she worked for the post office at one point. And public service jobs had pay scales, but they had 2 pay scales, one for a man and one for a woman. And the woman's was always lower than the man's, even for the same job. You couldn't get on the Supreme Court justice until it was 1981. I graduated in 1980. It was okay to be able to be discriminated against based on gender until 1964. Because you could be passed up for jobs and everything else, and it was fine because you were a woman. You couldn't run the Boston Marathon until somebody kind of illegally inserted herself in 1967 in the Boston Marathon. It wasn't legal to do it until 1972. So this is kind of the context that Dame Stephanie was in when she was out as a young woman to work and to make her way in the world. She is someone who at age 5 went from Nazi Europe and went to England, because all the, like 10,000 kids were shipped to, I believe it was England, under kinder transport. They were all shipped out when the Nazis took over parts of Europe. And so she basically was a 5-year-old that was sent off. I mean, I think about that and I just think how hard that would be. I mean, that would be so, I mean, I've seen it in movies, you know, little clips of them putting kids on trains and everybody's saying goodbye, but I mean, the reality that people lived that. So that was who she is. And she said she was later reunited with her parents, but she never connected with them. And I don't know, I can't remember how long it was they were separated, but anyway, so she had a job. She was really serious about a career. She wanted to move forward. She wanted to be promoted. Her boss wouldn't do it, refused to do it. Even when she applied for jobs in person, she wouldn't get them. Yet she would go like a back door, would turn in applications pretending, you know, like she didn't work for the already, and it proved that she was qualified for the job. And then also the system was that, you know, if the job required you to go work on a ship, women weren't allowed to be on ships. So it was just this thing, and she said she became fired up and became aggressive about this. She was discriminated as a Jew, and she wasn't going to be discriminated as a woman. So it just frustrated her to keep just like banging your head against the wall. They call it hitting the glass ceiling. The ceiling was way lower back in the 50s and 60s, like way lower. So, and I digress or take a tangent off to this. I think that's part of the problem that we have with Black Lives Matter. Not part of the problem, but part of their problem. That if an individual doesn't have power, if they're held back by the system, whatever the system is, they become aggressive. They become disenchanted. They become. I could just totally see if I were back then I was born in '62. If I were a young woman, how frustrating that would be, and how angry, and how much you'd want to change, because we intrinsically want to have control over our own lives, and we want to work within it's not that we don't want systems, it's just we want to be able to have a place in those systems where we have power to make decisions for ourselves, where we make a living for ourselves. I mean, we could go on, and I think that's the systematic racial problem that we have today. And yes, laws change, but culture takes so much longer to change. Takes so much longer. Okay, so back to Stephanie. So what she decided to do was in 1962, when she was 29 years old, I was born in 62, she decided she would start up a company. She had taken classes and was a great programmer. So she started a freelance software programming business. I think it was called Zanza, Xansa. I think you'd call it Zanza. So, and she tailored, well, it was very small at first, very, very small. But when she started getting women on board, she tailored it so it was basically an all-woman company. So then the working woman could be working moms, part-time, job sharing, you know, co-working, working around family. I don't know if you can hear them, but they're running around upstairs laughing and giggling. So she really decided to take that problem that all women faced and tried to just try to blow it up, try to do everything. So she had 6 pounds of investment, 6 pounds. That's all she had. So she starts this, and then she would send out like 12 letters a week to companies, promoting herself, talking about her business. Would you be interested? And absolutely no responses. Nobody wanted to. And finally, her husband suggested that she use her nickname Steve. So she started signing her letters Steve. And then she would get appointments. And they would be surprised when she'd go in, obviously, because they're not expecting a female Steve. But she would just plunge right ahead and be professional and just ignore the things that went on until she started to get business. But it was a struggle. It was a struggle for her to do that. She said one of her tricks was that she would, in order to sound professional, to make sure nobody heard her child in the background, she would put on a cassette tape of typing so that there was typing in the background and it sounded professional. And so she would, there were tricks that she would do in order to be able to compete in a male-dominated world, and particularly science. And she just kept at it, even with the sexual harassment, which went on. She said at that point, there was no recourse. There was nothing you could do. You just had to, she said somebody grabbed her, pinched her behind, and it wasn't like she could stop or, have anybody come to her aid. She just would maneuver herself around and put her back against a wall. I mean, those kinds of things that you're dealing with, as well as all the rest. I was just like, okay. And then, so what does she do? She becomes, does the programming for the black box on Supersonic Concorde. So she and a bunch of women are the ones who are working from their homes who design that. She also designs the software standard and management control protocols adopted by NATO. And these are, women doing part-time, smart women that are, they're living in this kind of a world that creates this kind of a barrier, and yet Dame Stephanie Steve Shirley figures out a way to make it. The company was, I think when she sold it, it was valued at over $3 billion. And the way she had set up the structure of it, when she sold it, she made 70 staff members, because you could buy into it, 70 staff members into millionaires. 70 millionaires. She had 8,500 employees. Let's see. In 1975, so all this, and then in 1975, Britain makes the equal opportunity legislation, so it's illegal for her to have an all-woman company. It's like one thing after another, but she just has this fire in her. She just has this drive in her, and she just is a problem solver, and is, she's going to do something different. She's going to make it happen. She's going to persevere. And so I'm just inspired by her. I had never heard of her. I saw a TED Talk. That's where I first saw her, was a TED Talk. And then I went to another thing. Facebook has a little, like a little booklet that came out. What is it called? It's about several British women, and I forget what it's called, and then I went to her website, and there's all kinds of stuff I'm going to continue to read. But the tip tonight is to find women that you can be inspired by, because there are tons out there. And unless we tell the stories, as in with anything else, it doesn't put the import on it, on ideas and on struggles and on life. When we start to put faces and stories to, like for the women in the 50s, 60s, when we start to put women like her faces and their names and their struggles, it's just like, man, you just have to go, good for you to pave the way. And I think so. Find stories, and if you have stories or women that you have seen that have had that kind of impact, where you've learned, man, they went through a lot of things, man, they made it a significant inroads on the path for us to women to go forward. Put their names down there so we can learn about them, study them, see what motivated them. And Steve Shirley. So that is the tip. Find out learn about women. You can learn about anybody, but I just think women ought to be learning about women, be able to by them, their struggles, share that. So that's the tip. Let's see, today is Monday. I will see you tomorrow on Tuesday. In the meantime, remember, you have a creative heartbeat, so listen for it. I'll be back. Bye.